Support for this podcast is brought to you by
Bridge Credit Solutions.
That's a way to start an episode. Guys, Momo just told me that someone came over to him and said what?
It's true, yeah. We were out at Mike's Bistro. Shout out to Mike. And someone asked me, do you know of anyone that could help with credit? I don't know if they were messing with me.
How dare you go over to Momo Bauman and ask him if you know anybody that can help out your credit? Because
I instinctively was just like looked straight at them in the face. I was like, Bridge Credit Solutions.
We went into robot mode.
Like, whoa.
Yeah, because that's the only people that you need to reach out to, that you should reach out to fix your credit. So go ahead, hit the link in the description or in the show notes and get in touch with the best credit repair company that you could ever reach out to.
Bridge Credit Solutions.
Support for this podcast is also brought to you by Chayenu. Okay, we have our new friends at Chayenu. Mama, what is Chayenu?
Chayenu is a very cool subscription to daily Torah study. Nachi has a little bit more on the chitas aspect of it.
Yes, Chita stands for Chumash, Tanya, Tehillim. I don't know if it's that order. But there also is Rambam in here. And the amazing thing about this is you get this, they mail it out. They do 2 mailings per month, and they go 2 weeks at a time. This is Parshas Balak over here. And
it's just in print. It's in digital format. You get access to the app. It's a really cool and convenient way to format your daily Torah study.
And they have tens of thousands of people that are learning with them.
Yeah, over 30,000 daily learners, not daily readers, very deep, daily learners.
But we have something special for you, right? We're Jews. We like things for free. So if you head to chayenu.org/trial, you'll get 3 free months.
There's no I in Chayenu, by the way.
There's no I. It's
just
you.
About us.
Yes, it's about you. It's about you learning.
Us as a people.
Yes, us and you and us. And you. If you go to chayenu.org/trial, get 3 free months. There's no reason not to do it. So go ahead, head to chayenu.org/trial, get your first 3 months of Chayenu on the house, and start learning.
Yeah, daily.
We had an awesome guest this week, Rabbi Yehiel Kalish.
Yes.
CEO of Hatzalah, somebody who was in government.
Fascinating story that he has.
Yeah.
As a member of the House of Representatives, was faced with some very, very difficult, just value-based questions, what to do about abortion-related issues. He was forced to vote on the legalization of abortion within a very short period of time of becoming appointed to the House of Representatives in Illinois. And he had to choose between his values and being able to continue to do incredible things, hundreds of millions of dollars that he's secured for the frum community. And he was really faced with a very, very severe moral dilemma.
So you will hear that story and many more in this episode with Yehiel Kalish. It's so funny. We recorded this episode a very long time ago, and we were slotting it to release it now, coincidentally. But what's going on in the world with Roe versus Wade, and there's a lot in this episode.
And coincidentally, I and my wife ended up in a Hatzalah ambulance last night, no less. Baruch Hashem, everyone is okay. But Hatzalah is just so incredible. The dedication, the devotion of these Hatzalah members and their families, it's truly remarkable.
So we all love Hatzalah and get to know the CEO right here, Yehiel Kalish. Here you go. You are listening to the Meaningful People Podcast.
The podcast featuring our nation's most impactful, influential,
and meaningful people. Such an honor to be joined by Rabbi?
Yes, sir.
Rabbi Yehiel Kalish. All the way from Chicago.
Harris Street.
This is the second. I don't know. Is that in Chicago?
Harris Street is in Far Rockaway.
Oh.
Born in Philly, though, right?
Born in Philly.
Wow.
Born in Philly, raised in Cincinnati. Went to Chicago when I was in 9th grade. So, and basically, most of my life I spent in Chicago. When people ask me where I'm from, I just keep it easy. I'm from Chicago. Yeah.
I feel like I've done an abnormal amount of Chicago episodes.
Chicago's awesome. It's my kind of town.
Produces a lot of
meaningful people.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what happens in Chicago. I'll tell you why that happens.
That was good.
Yeah, I'll tell you why that happens. In Chicago, the older generation, and this is miyuchis for generations, the older generations give the younger guys an opportunity to succeed.
Mm.
And when you're given an opportunity to succeed and you're given the support by the older generation, you have a greater chance of success. And that greater chance gives you experience. And that experience can go from one city to another city. So you see like Yitzchak Ehrman right now, who's the head of Aguda, right? He had all those years in Chicago. He was given at 20-something years old an opportunity to succeed. Right? Baruch Hashem, I had an opportunity to succeed when I was a young guy. These Chicago guys, Baruch Hashem, the Balabatim, right? And now we see my generation of Balabatim giving the next generation of Balabatim the opportunity to succeed. I think it's a wonderful thing that happens in Chicago.
That's a really big shout out to Chicago right there. Like that's like, wow. Chicago just went crazy.
People love it.
Yes. Chicago is very, very, very special.
Bulls fan?
No, I was born in Philly.
We had heard something. We heard
crazy.
that there's no such thing as a frum Jew that goes to the Chicago White Sox.
No, so
is that true?
No,
it isn't true.
No, good guys wear black.
We did hear that.
Good guys wear black. So in fact, the Aguda leadership, I won't name names, but the Aguda,
that's kind of you.
The Aguda leadership in Chicago is pretty strong Sox fans.
Oh wow!
I'll tell you, great Misa.
Not gonna oust them, are we?
No, the Chicago White Sox played a important role in the Jewish school children in Chicago getting busing.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay. The Speaker of the House in Illinois, the longest serving speaker in the history of the United States, who is now under federal investigation, Karoy, was a guy by the name of Mike Madigan. He was my Rabbi in politics. I learned a lot from this man. And he had office hours for the public, usually on Sunday mornings. Otherwise, he was busy in his law firm or whatever. So one Sunday morning, we were working on this legislation to try to get the state to pay for the school busing for the children in Chicago. It was something that they had in New York. We used to get that all the time. We have it in New York, right? But we didn't have it in Chicago. So, and it would make a big difference, and it has made a big difference. So we go down to the South Side. Mr. Madigan lived in the deep South Side, and if you know anything about the White Sox, they're a South Side team, right? Cubs are on the North Side, Sox on the South Side. And we go down to Mr. Madigan, and I went with one of our Balabatim. And this Balabas is a massive White Sox fan. And him and Speaker just hit it off on the Sox. They start quoting, right? Like, I don't want to say his name because Halavai could quote Tysus like he was quoting these White Sox stats. And him and the Speaker went at it. And he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "This is what we need." That started the path.
I'm glad we spoke about Avi Chanel already. Yeah. Like that's probably not Avi.
Yeah.
That's
no,
awesome.
That is not Avi. I don't know if Avi was born yet when that happened.
Yeah. That's an awesome story. And then I imagine that led to busing being granted.
That led to us being able to have the conversations to develop what ended up becoming the busing grant that went pretty much from, I think it's now in its 12th or 13th year, so which is an amazing thing. So we had 1 year where there was a suffix, but Baruch Hashem, 12, 13 years, maybe even longer, that program has not stopped.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So when I think of your professional career, I sort of think of Yehiel Kalish in three categories: politics, Aguda, and Hatzalah. So some might say two of those are politics, being a politician in Hatzalah, but there's
erroneous.
No politics in Hatzalah.
No, of course not. But I want to that's sort of how I think of it. Is that a correct, I guess, call it assumption about your life?
Yeah, I mean,
Cincinnati Koil has to be featured.
Cincinnati Koil, Baruch Hashem. We're just at the dinner. We're just at the wedding. The other night, my good friend Ronnie Wilhelm. He married off.
Yosef?
One of his. Yeah.
I was Yosef.
Yeah.
Oh, I was Yosef.
Beautiful.
Yosef.
Of course. We were together at the wedding.
We were together at the wedding. Beautiful chasna, and sitting at that wedding is a guy by the name of Steve Rosedale, right? You know who Steve Rosedale is?
Sure.
Steve Rosedale is Ronnie Wilhelm's stepfather, but he adopted him basically. So Steve Rosedale's wife, Ronnie Wilhelm's mother, is from Philadelphia. In fact, Ronnie Wilhelm and I grew up on the same street when I was born. I've known Ronnie Wilhelm for 40-something years.
Wow.
And I'm only 46. And Steve,
he's a good yid.
He's a great Jew. And Steve Rosedale, who is Ronnie's stepfather, took care of the boys in Cincinnati. Like when we moved to Cincinnati and Rosedale, the Wilhelm families married each other, so we got to know Rosedale a little bit better because of Wilhelm. And he made sure kids like me went to yeshiva.
Wow.
And then he made sure that there was a kollel that was brought to town. And I was the first Cincinnati kid to be a member of the Cincinnati kollel.
Wow.
Right? I was the first member of the kollel who grew up in Cincinnati. So I came back to Cincinnati. And from that kollel, I met Shmuel Bloom, Rabbi Shmuel Bloom, who was executive vice president of the Aguda.
Mm-hmm.
And right then and there, he offered me a interview to come work for Agudas Yisroel. So crazy. I mean, we were at a Kumsitz. It was Motzei Shabbos. Rabbi Bloom was the guest rabbi for Shabbos in Cincinnati, and I was running the Kumsitz for the kollel. And Rabbi Bloom was sitting next to me, and a good friend of mine, Menachem Blau, who lives now in Far Rockaway, Leon Goldenberg's son-in-law, if you know Leon.
We are name dropping right now. Like this is amazing. The amount of people are name dropping. Like, this episode's gonna get crazy.
All of their numbers and email addresses are in the comments.
Absolutely. Follow their Instagram.
Yeah.
But Menachem Blau comes out to Shmuel Bloom, Rabbi Bloom, and he says to him, you know, Rabbi Kalish wants to work for you. And Rabbi Bloom looks at me, and I'm sitting there leading this kumsitz with all these people, right? And Rabbi Bloom looks at me and says, what do you know about Agudas Yisroel? And I started telling him all the things that I'd read about Rabbi Moshe Sher and Agudas Yisroel and all the things they accomplished. He said, you know, when you're ready to leave kollel, give me a call. Let's talk what happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
I noticed in a video that you have a picture of Rabbi Moshe Sher on your wall. I presume that's in your home office.
Yes.
Did that, you know, adulation predate your involvement in Aguda?
Way predated. Since I was 11 years old, my mother ended up on a mailing list where my mother is not your typical Agudist, right? She would probably fall more into the Mizrahi camp. And like they go to Young Israel, right? That's more my mother. But somehow she ended up on an Aguda mailing list.
Right.
And I would just eat it up. I was a fan of Moshe Sher. I wanted to work for Agudas Yisroel since I was 11 years old.
Maybe take a moment. A lot of our listeners or viewers might not be as familiar with Rabbi Moshe Sher. Maybe take a moment to just develop that personality.
Rabbi Moshe Sher was a very unique personality in the history of Klal Yisrael, in the history of American Jewry in Klal Yisrael. Right, there are very few individuals who have had the impact on Klal Yisrael outside of the Rabbanus that Rav Moshe Sher had. He was a Talmid of Bnei Yisrael. He was the cousin of the famous Mike Tress, who was a war hero and who was an individual who started the entire Jewish camping network. Mike Tress started what we know as Jewish camping today, was started by the Tress family. And Rabbi Sher, who was a successful individual, had it in mind that he was going to develop an organized group of people to advocate in government and other places wherever was necessary for Klal Yisrael. That didn't exist before. Agudas Yisroel was the first. He had the audacity to go to Washington, D.C., right, before it was cool, right? He schlepped Balabatim up to Albany. He created this image of Klal Yisrael, Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad, that there was one heart of Klal Yisrael was beating, and there was an Aguda, and we were all together. And he developed these programs that brought thousands of people together. Right? His crescendo was probably, I think it was the 9th or the 10th Siyam Hashas, the first one at Madison Square Garden that took place. It was audacity to think that we could fill up Madison Square Garden. Now we think of MetLife Stadium like it's nothing, right? So, you know, he created all of these concepts that just didn't exist in Klal Yisrael before here in America, right? Maybe in Poland, right? Meir Shapiro, who was a member of the Polish Sem, right? He maybe had that concept, but really in America it was Rabbi Moshe Sher who created all of these concepts. And when he passed away, there was a huge void left in Klal Yisrael, and you see that's when all these other moistas, all these other advocacy organizations started to pop up.
Do you think the fact that there are so many of those other advocate organizations that have popped up, do you think that's a benefit to Klal Yisrael, or it's sort of like there's too many cooks in the kitchen?
It's hard to say. There's some really good ones out there.
Yeah.
Like the OU has a great role that they play. A bunch of the Hasidic groups that have decided to professionalize themselves and really take it to the next level in terms of their own advocacy, I think is a very positive thing, because that's a voice that prior didn't exist. But I was sitting with Mayor Adams the other day, and we were actually in a car together, and he is getting out of the car, and he looks at me and he said, you guys got a lot of organizations. And then he stopped, he paused, and he looks at me, he says, your organizations have organizations.
That is true. That's awesome.
This is a great line by the mayor, but that's really, so what does that mean? That means that Klal Yisrael cares about each other. And that means that, anyone who finds how many gemachs are there in Lakewood, right? How many gemachs are there we care. So I look at it as a positive. But when it comes to government, right, which is why you're asking the question, government can be tricky. And government doesn't see a difference between the OU Jew and the Aguda Jew and the Satmar Jew, right? They see no difference, right? That representative from upstate New York or downstate Illinois sees a Jew. That's all they see. They are incapable of seeing anything else. In government, we like to say it's black and white, right? Not because they can't see gray, just they don't have the ability. They have so much coming at them, they just don't have the time to process it. Yes, if they take a step back and you spend enough years and enough time with a certain individual, maybe they can understand the nuance. But nuance is lost in government.
You're, not to jump ahead much, but
Which means he's about to
which
jump
means I'm
ahead
about to
much.
take a massive leap. But
Big Nishlev Shabbos Garet right there.
Yeah,
your,
absolutely.
your career in politics.
Sure.
Let's just discuss that a little bit. Your time at the Aguda eventually came to an end.
Right.
And
one day I walked into Rabbi Zwiebel's office. I was already a vice president. They had made me vice president in 2012, and in 2012 I was in my 30s, so what am I doing next? Right. I'm 30 something years old, so therefore my brain started to freak out. I'm going to be in this same position until I went into Rabbi Zwiebel, and I said, well, either he was 55.
I'm taking your job.
Right. I like either you get hit by a truck, which I think would be terrible because I really like you, or I'm stuck in this job for the next 20 years.
And it's worth noting, this was long before the Aguda really developed their young leadership programs.
Well, I developed that. Those are the guys who I hired, and we had developed that. Actually, I had a great team, but I had no growth. Right, I had no idea.
You reached
your own position,
for my own position, my own potential, and I felt that I could do more. So I started actually my own lobbying firm. I went to him. I said, "Listen, I want to stay part of Agudas Yisroel. I want to stay part of Rosh Yeshiva Zechron Levracha Avraham Chaim Levin." He said that I should join the board of trustees, which I did. I joined the board of trustees of Agudas Yisroel as a volunteer. I stayed engaged with the Aguda, but I started my own firm, which was going really nicely until I got a call from Moshe Davis. I'll never forget it. I was born in Kaplain to, Moshe.
Sure.
So I was born in Kaplain to New York, and I was with my shut of Yankee Filer.
Shout out to Yankee.
Yeah, shout out to Yankee.
Jack Filer.
Jack Filer's the best. And
what a Shmuley Filer to Jack Filer.
his son.
Get out of here.
No way.
Shout out to Shmuley Filer.
Yeah. And the new baby.
Oh, Mazda. Awesome.
Yeah.
Fully developed shout out right there.
Fully developed shout out. So I was born in the plane, and Moshe Davis calls me, and he said, Lou Lang is stepping down from his position as state representative, and a bunch of us think you should jump in. And
What a phone call.
what a phone call! What a phone
You remember where you were when you got
I
it?
remember exactly where I was. I remember. Not only do I remember where I was on the plane. I remember I was on the plane. I remember what position I was in as I was taking my seat. In other words, like that's how vivid the memory is of that.
Must have been a real confidence booster. I just can't imagine getting a phone call from someone saying, "I think you should run for like this high position."
It's not even
of
running.
power."
It's being appointed to the position.
Appointed. Yeah.
That's
So. So I said to him on the spot, I understood where he was coming from in terms of asking the question, who was motivating him and why they were calling me. And I said to him, I'm probably the only one who will get past the appointment process. And he said, you're right. You're probably the only one who will get past that process. So I said, what's this worth to the community? Because I really wasn't as involved in the Chicago community like I had been prior. Like when I came back to run my firm, I was really running my firm. I was involved in Agudas Yisroel of America, but I wasn't involved in the Chicago community as much, even though we lived there.
right.
So he said the impact would be tremendous. In fact, the impact ended up being $350 million. That was the impact from a financial standpoint.
To where exactly?
To the different organizations and industries where Klal Yisrael was employed.
It's a nice sum of money.
Yes, yeah, we did well. It was the right move, the right appointment. But like history has shown us, it definitely came with its challenges.
You had mentioned that you felt that, and he felt that you'd probably be the only one that would get past the appointment process. What?
I was a known entity, not just within the Orthodox community, but also within the secular Jewish community. Because of my involvement in Federation, I was involved in Jewish Federation in Metropolitan Chicago. I knew a lot of the political players in Springfield. I was very close to the Speaker of the House in Illinois. When I called him and asked him, should I go for this appointment, he said, I would very much like to have you in the House of Representatives.
It is a rare transition from a lobbying firm to move over to represent in the House.
It was
right?
the first in a very long time. And it happened prior, but it was the first in a very long time. I'm also the only rabbi to ever serve in the Illinois legislature. So it was unique on a bunch of levels. It's the reason we were able to succeed so much, even though I was a freshman, was because I spent all those years on the other side of the table.
Right.
So it wasn't like we didn't know what we were doing when we went in there. We knew exactly what we were doing as it related to the work of the legislator. The politics was a different story.
It's like you see a lot nowadays. A lot of NBA player agents are becoming GMs.
Mhm.
They've sat at one side of the table, and a guy like Bob Myers, who was a player agent for a very long time, became the GM of the Warriors. And
Right.
success is like,
Yeah, he dominated.
same thing with
right?
the Lakers. And
Right.
forgot his name, Pelinka?
Oh, was he an agent first?
He was, yeah.
And then he built the team that won the championship in the
Yeah.
COVID. Right.
So they call Chicago the Windy City, and it's not because of the. It's not because of the. It's not because
Pretty
of the
windy
weather.
today. It was pretty windy today in New
I
York.
know, but it's not because of the. It's not because of the weather.
It's
And
the
obviously, I don't want
politics,
this
the
whole
politics.
episode to be about politics, because politics is like a trigger word for so many people nowadays.
Yeah.
But just to speak to being a Frum Jew in the Windy City,
Yeah.
what's that like?
To be a Frum Jew, I'll never forget the morning of the vote, right? The vote that I had to cast against abortion. And we can, flesh that out if we need to. But just to clarify, the vote that I cast, not to create a fundamental right to abortion, right? Because that's what they wanted to create.
That's
That's what was on the table. They wanted to create a fundamental right to abortion. That means anytime, any place, any reason, right? So that morning, I'm a morning guy, and I know the speaker's a morning guy. And that morning, I didn't need to wake up because I didn't sleep the night before. And I had gone, through a lot of emotion, whatever. So I went to the speaker's, a lot of conversations. So I went to the speaker's office at 7:30 in the morning. And I knew he was going to be there. And I just literally just walked into his office, and he had the whole budget. Like, he was so involved in the budget at that time. Like, it was 2 days before we were going to pass the budget, and the whole budget spread out on his desk. And I was like, whoa, what do we got? What do we got going on? But I looked at the speaker and I said to him, I said, could Bill Clinton win in today's Democratic Party? Because Bill Clinton was pro-life.
Right.
And he said no. Bill Clinton, this is a man, he's 76 years old, Mr. Madigan, right? So he's been through a lot. And he said Bill Clinton could not win in today's Democratic Party. That's when I knew I couldn't either.
That's when you knew that if you were to vote against this bill, that was your kiss of death in politics.
It was over. Right.
So let's set the stage for this dilemma that you're faced with, right? So you're appointed to this position, literally, not literally, but figuratively overnight.
3 weeks, but it could easily be overnight. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Pretty figurative.
in political terms,
That's exceedingly fast.
practically overnight.
Yes.
And as you're ramping up for the election process, this bill is up and it's seeking to establish a fundamental right to abort at any stage, late stage, regardless.
Right.
And there you are.
Anytime, any place, any reason.
There you are. And as a result of your position in the House, you can abstain, you can vote present, you can vote for, you can vote against, and you're sitting in a Democratic seat, and your constituents are historically at that time
100%. There's no doubt that my constituency supported this legislation. In fact, when I went to one of the Moyer Hara, I identified this bill in January, right? So this is now May.
You
right?
saw this. You're like, oh no.
We saw this. I saw this.
Oh gosh.
And I jumped on a plane and I went to Moyer Hara and I said, this may happen. We actually worked for months to keep the bill from passing, and at one point, from being introduced. At one point, we thought we had succeeded. But then Kentucky happened. Kentucky and Arkansas happened. They had passed what the Democrats referred as draconian anti-abortion laws. And because of those laws, that brought this back to life. But anyway, I was by this Moyer Hara, and I don't know if it's appropriate to share who, whatever. But I was by him, a very, very special person who has since passed away. And I said to him, I said, this is what's coming. And I said, I know politics. I said, Rabbi, I know politics. And I know that if I don't vote for this, I'm out. So let me vote for it. I can do a lot more good for the Jewish people in this position. And he started crying. He said, what's going to be with my Yechiel? He said, what about your neshama? Wow. He said, your neshama will never recover from such a vote. And you're more important to me than anything you can accomplish in the legislature.
wow.
The whole room was bawling.
So there's other people there.
There were other people there. There were a bunch of them. There were 4 or 5 other people there.
Did that get you emotional?
Yeah, we were all crying.
Sponsored by Kleenex.
But then it happens, right? So that's January.
I want to double click just on the lesson in the relationship between a Rebbe and a Talmud.
Yeah.
Just being able to be Messiah.
Yeah.
Do you specifically not want to say who that was?
Because there were other shilas that were asked, and unfortunately, there were other votes that I took, and
I'm always the one that empowers you to put up a boundary.
yeah.
Nachi's looking for information.
Yeah.
But the relationship between a
Nachi
Rebbe...
knows who it was. I told him before the show.
I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for all the listeners.
I know who you're asking for.
Or like they're texting Shai Markowitz. Who was it? Who was it?
Yeah.
But to be able to care for a Talmud in that way,
That's why everyone's crying, because that's unadulterated love. That's real love. That's real love. When not only is it real love, right, between a Rebbe and a Talmud, it is truly understanding ruchnius, right? Being able to separate all gashmias out of the room and being able to understand ruchnius, because he's right. What happens to my family if my ruchnius gets right? What happens to my children? What happens to my relationship with my wife? What happens to their generation if they don't have the father they thought they had? Like, what happens in all these different scenarios? He saw all of that in a second, in a moment.
All those iterations of the same decision.
Yeah.
We'll be right back to this episode.
Right back.
Every time. But first,
Not every time, almost every time.
almost every time. But
But
first,
we will be right back, though. That is the truth.
it's true. Very, very quickly.
Right back.
We want to tell you about our friends at Touro University. They are like the go-to place.
They really are.
If you're Jewish, Orthodox Jew, you want a place that values your values, that can stick with your schedule. You know, you don't have to compromise what you believe in. You don't have to compromise any of that.
Not your lifestyle, not your values. We talk so much with Rabbi Kalish about staying true to your values and being out there and doing good in the world, but also keeping your values close. And Touro does a fabulous job of enabling and empowering people to do that.
So go ahead, head to touro.edu/more to find out how you can get your journey started at Touro. Back to this episode.
I feel like a lot of our listeners, very few of them are sitting in the House of Representatives.
Yes.
But a lot of them face decisions on a daily basis where it's so easy to rationalize something that's gray, that's not even clearly, wrong or against their belief or against Das Torah. And there's so many things that they can tell themselves. It's okay. It's for the greater good. What's the big deal? And there you were sitting there with clear-cut argument for the other side. $350 million worth.
That's year one.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
Right?
But at the end of the day,
It wasn't so easy, I'll tell you. Even when you're in the pressure cooker, and even knowing, and this is a Misa that deserves to be told. So we had an emergency Moyatzis meeting because we had a nuance. I had talked out with the Rabbi, and we had a nuance that maybe could, if they introduce a certain change to the bill language, that might allow me to vote for the bill and protect the seat.
Would you be able to abstain at all, or like that would be also the same as voting against it?
In the party, there was no.
Right. Okay.
That was not an option.
Just thinking around, loopholes. Maybe you thought about doing this.
117 people made it, and you didn't.
how funny would it be? How funny would it be right now? Yechiel was sitting there and would be like, "We did not think of that. That is such a good idea.
Great.
Achi, where were you?"
Listen, if you can go back in time.
Yes. If I could go back in time, I would have voted no, not present.
Yeah.
But the
Emergency Mayatzis.
there was an emergency Mayatzis meeting, and one of the Chavrei Mayatzis stopped the conversation, and he said very clearly, the front page of every Jewish newspaper will not have the nuance. It will say Rabbi Yehiel Kalish votes in favor of abortion.
Wow.
That's all it will say. And he shut it down. And I have to tell you, it was the most lonely and scared I've ever felt in my life. And that night, 2 people showed up in Springfield. Now, to give you an idea, how far is Springfield from Chicago?
6 hours.
It's a 3.5-hour drive.
It's close.
Right. It's a 3.5-hour drive. My Rebbe, from the time I was in yeshiva in Skokie, who was also our Rav, who's answered all of our family shilas, our entire life, of Zev Cohn, who is a man who has never missed a shiur that he was scheduled to give, missed 3 shiurim, mincha, and ma'ariv, to drive down without telling me and give me a hug.
Wow.
This is before or after you voted no?
Before the vote.
Before the vote.
After the Me'etzes
meeting,
Psak.
he was on the phone with the Me'etzes.
Wow.
And he said, he came down, he gave me a hug and a kiss, and he said, it's so easy for us to sit in our chairs hundreds of miles away while you were here absolutely by yourself. He gave me a hug and a kiss. He got back in the car and drove back.
Wow.
And Yitzchak Ehrman, who's now COO of Agudas Yisroel of America, also drove down. Yitzchak and I are both Talmidim of the Rosh Yeshiva Ram Chaim Levin, who had since passed away already. And he brought me dinner.
What did he bring
He
you?
brought me shallots.
Oh, okay.
He brought me shallots.
Okay.
He brought me a shallot steak.
Chicago goes wild.
Those two people gave me the strength. Of course, my wife came down the next day, but if it wasn't for Rabbi Cohn and Rabbi Ehrman, Mamish being mechazik, you're so alone. I remember speaking to a veteran politician early in my tenure in the House, and she said to me, she says, if you want friends in leadership, get a dog.
Wow. Wow. Or a band.
Or a vein.
Let me ask you something. Was there even a second of thought on your end after the Moetzes made up Psak and after you spoke to that Rosh Yeshiva who said what he
I knew
said?
I had what I had to do.
There wasn't a second of like, I'm going to...
No.
We're laughing, but like...
Go rogue.
No.
Was that a bad question?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's just no way. No. I am a Baruch Hashem. My whole life has been Al Pi Das Torah. Yeah.
But that's like... I don't know. That's special.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem.
Not as like... I'm not going to say like, oh, it's amazing that you didn't, but even to think about for a second, like, is this the right thing?
Well, that's worth double clicking on that as well, which means
I love the term double clicking.
nice.
Yeah, there
Feel
you
free
go.
to use it throughout the podcast.
What does it mean, double click? No, I'm just kidding.
But to live one's life, al pi das Torah, is a decision that you really set your life on a certain trajectory. And then regardless of what difficult decisions you face, and the more public of a life you're living, the more public your decision making will be, of course.
Correct.
But when you're living al pi das Torah, that's always the prescription.
Always a prescription.
And the avoid is to always be in that place where when I encounter something that's difficult, when I have a decision that I need to make, I always have the das Torah that I have a relationship with. It's very hard to manufacture that relationship in a vacuum when you have a crisis, and you can't just call a emergency Me'etzes meeting. You have to have that context with you.
So as I said to you earlier, the person who I asked the Shaila has since passed away. So a few months later, right after the vote, when I went to ask permission not to have to run for re-election, but he had told me, no, you knock on those doors.
Really?
He wanted me to go through that process. He wanted me to,
As opposed to just admitting defeat right as
Just
a result of the...
Like
No.
closing that chapter.
because he says you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. We have no idea, and this will make you a better person. He was right. The hardest thing I ever did. But at that meeting, he was getting sick. He was getting older, and he knew he was. And he had another, who I didn't know as well. I knew of him. He knew of me, but I didn't really know him. And he said to him, he says, I'm getting old. I can't handle some of the shilas that Yechiel's bringing to me because they're so heavy. I want you, this Rosh Hashanah, I want you to answer those shilas now. He says, Yechiel, I want you to
Awesome.
ask them to him as my shliach.
That awareness is wow.
It's amazing. And so this Rosh Hashanah was amazing because, like you said, like he didn't know me, right? So he said, I want you to call me once a month, just even if there's nothing going on,
Mm-hmm.
just so I get to hear and we get to develop a sprach. Baruch Hashem,
So that sort of was the end of the politics chapter in your position over there. You're sitting in front of us wearing a Chevra Hatzalah sweatshirt.
A very nice one.
Very
Yes.
nice one, yeah.
Very
We,
nice.
we do swag well.
Yes.
Yes.
It says you
all
also
about
do
the
saving.
swag.
You also do saving lives well.
Yes, we do.
It's a CEO one, and you have an Hatzalah walkie-talkie or radio
Yes.
on this table. So I guess tell us a little bit about your.
I was
Were you on a plane when you got back home?
It was crazy. I was not on a plane. I was actually in my bunker because it was COVID. And I was operating out of my basement in Chicago, and we had made a decision after we lost the election. Even during the election, we said, "Oh, if this doesn't work out, I'm probably going to go back into lobbying."
Right.
And because that's where I was prior, so it made sense. Probably not the same thing. Yankee and I were talking, different options. Back to the Jack Filer, shout out.
Nice.
Greatest guy on the planet.
Shmuley and the baby.
Shmuley baby. So we had a plan. It was actually a very good plan. And around Sukkot time, we were sitting around the table, and my wife looks at me and she says, "You are not going back to lobbying."
Wow.
She said, "No." I said, "Well, okay."
Like Bina Yisera right there.
Right. I said, we got a lot lined up.
Yeah.
Right. Like, this is not so poshut. And she says, "You were meant to work for Klal Yisrael." She said, "That's what I married. You
Wow.
were meant to work for Klal Yisrael." She said, "The reason you jumped into the state representative is to help the community." She says, "That's your tchunas nefesh and Agudas Yisroel. That's what you did." So I looked at her and I said, "Klal Yisrael means New York." Right?
Right.
Because just I'd been there before, right?
I don't know if the out-of-town people are so happy about that.
Right. But it does. When 80% of the Orthodox Jewish community in this country lives on the road from Montreal to Baltimore, right? Like 80%.
Wow, that's a real stat.
Right.
Okay.
Live right there. So, right, as big as we think Chicago is, right? And Chicago's awesome, which we established earlier in the program.
And Los Angeles. Shout out to Los Angeles.
Far Rockaway and Bayswater have more Jews than Chicago.
What?
Yes. Far Rockaway and Bayswater, that little,
Has more Jews than Chicago.
has more Orthodox Jews than Chicago.
What?
Not 5 towns.
I didn't.
Far Rockaway. If you take 5 towns.
You said that like the LARR.
Right.
Far Rockaway.
Yeah.
Spent many years on that. If you take 5 towns Far Rockaway, that's your Midwest from Denver all the way to Cleveland.
Wow.
And Dallas, Houston, everything. 5 towns. We're not talking. We haven't even gone to Brooklyn yet. We're just talking 5 towns Far Rockaway. When you start adding in 50,000 families in Lakewood, right?
Right.
5 gazillion families in Brooklyn, right? Muncie, right? Start doing those numbers. Baltimore's larger than Chicago, right? So now Los Angeles, as we brought up earlier, is truly the second city in the Orthodox community. It's really New York as a single city, and then LA, Sephardim, the Iranians, really, help those numbers
And the balance.
tremendously.
The Svardim and the Radiants.
I mean, you're really number 2, but it's so far away from New York.
Right.
I wouldn't LA is probably the same size as, Queens or whatever,
That's crazy perspective. Like I didn't
You never
think
thought about
no.
that, right? I think,
So New York that's where you say that's Klal Yisrael.
So my wife said, so I said that, so that would mean moving again.
Right.
And she said, let's see what happens. So I actually got 2 different organizations that reached out to me. One in Eretz Yisrael, which was very enticing.
Wow.
And one in Hatzalah. And if you recall, the Aguda convention that year was online.
Virtual, yeah.
Virtual. So I did a session with Rabbi Aaron Feldman and Rabbi Yisrael Reisman. We did a session together. At least 3 of those questions were about what I should do in my life. But I had received an email out of nowhere. I got an email from Isaac Stern. And Isaac Stern identified himself as on the board of Chavrei Hatzalah, and he wanted to talk to me about something important. And I knew very little about Hatzalah, and I knew even less about the board of Hatzalah, and I didn't know Isaac Stern, which I thought was weird because I was involved in Klal Yisrael and we were name dropping. I can name drop pretty good, you know. So I get around, and I didn't know who he was. So I had two people that I'm close with in Hatzalah. Rabbi Bender has been a very important part of our family for a long time. In fact, when I first moved to New York back in 2010, Rosh Yeshiva Ram Chaim said to me, he said, go to Yankel Bender, right? And one of the best pieces of advice that the Rosh Yeshiva ever gave me. Rabbi Bender has been an incredible part of our life on a very personal level. And but I knew he was Hatzalah guy, right?
Yeah.
He started Flatbush Hatzalah. So I called Rabbi Bender, and I called Naftali Solomon, right? Good friend. I don't know if you know Naftali, right? You know,
Neighbor. Yeah.
yeah, right. Shout out to 718 Insurance.
Yeah.
So I called Naftali Solomon, and Naftali is so funny. He said to me, "You call him back,
Fast.
right? You call him back."
Hatzalah always responds very quickly. You got to return the favor.
Well, I was in public office, a very public figure. At that time, I was still a representative. I may have lost the election, but I served until January, so I was still in public office. I get emails from a lot of people identify. You just don't know if it's always true, and you don't know what trap they're trying to take you. End up on some radio podcast.
That's a lot.
That's what happened here. He thought he was going on Joe Rogan or something.
Yeah. You're much better looking.
Oh, thank you.
So
Momo too.
Absolutely. So so I call him back, and he starts explaining to me about Hatzalah, and I don't know where he was going with the conversation. Like, Hatzalah sounds great. Yeah, Hatzalah's awesome.
Hatzalah's good stuff.
Right. Yeah. And then he's like, we've been without a CEO for it's 2013, so 2021, it's around 8 years. And then I thought, oh my God, this is an interview. And he said he had read the Mishpacha article that my good friend Binyamin Rose wrote, which is a whole story about, in and of itself, how that article happened. And he said he read the article, and he said he'd like me an interview for the position. And it was exciting then, but now knowing, being here for a little bit over a year and a half, Hatzalah is awesome.
Yeah.
Hatzalah is awesome.
I think there are very few, maybe no people would argue with that Hatzalah is awesome. Our communities around the world. I mean, I heard a number, this is airing after Pesach, but Baruch Hashem, Pesach was beautiful in Orlando, and everyone got their food on time. But there's over 100,000 from Jews in Orlando for Pesach, and
so there's probably 50,000 from Jews going to Orlando for Pesach, and around 50,000 going to Miami.
So Florida.
So Florida probably has close to 100,000, and it's Kanai
and Hatzalah last year Pesach had some
really amazing
life-saving work in Orlando.
It's very special.
So you get into this field, Hatzalah, which is it's synonymous with Jewish life.
Sure. Well, it has become synonymous, right? Yes. As I like to tell people, in communities today, right, it's shul mikvah, yeshiva, and Hatzalah. Right. Right. As you're developing a community, that's basically the path.
So you're in that position of CEO of Hatzalah. I'm just curious, and we'll talk a little bit about the intricacies and maybe some stories that came with this position. But was there a time or was there a moment where you maybe turned down a bigger, more prestigious, larger salary, higher income position to join, again, more klal work?
That's exactly what we did. I mean, and
numbers.
Yeah.
I'm joking. How much money? I'm kidding.
Yeah. The base salary in that other position was more than double what I'm making right now. So way more than double. And with much greater benefits. Again, strictly financial, but that's not what it's about.
So what is it about for you?
It's about waking up in the morning thinking you're making a difference, and you're inspiring others to make a difference. Because that's really, a CEO, you're the chief cheerleader, right? That's especially as a civilian, right? I'm not an EMT. I'm not a paramedic. I'm a civilian, and I keep on. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're gonna go EMT, right?" But that's not my job. My job is to make sure that the individuals who are out on calls every single day have that ability to just do what they want to do. These guys, our members, who are awesome, they just want to save lives, right? I remember sitting with Herschel Weber, who's the OG, they call him, right? He's the founder. And I was sitting with Herschel Weber, and I asked him, what's the motivation? He said, all you need to do is save one life, and you're hooked. He said, that drive to save another life will push you through 50 other calls, right, where somebody stubbed their toe, right, until you get to that next opportunity to save a life. And it happens every day. Every day it happens. And it's amazing.
A life is saved every day.
Every day. Every day. It's amazing.
Wow.
So when that's greater than any parnassa, my kids may argue.
Your wife does not.
My wife does not. My wife knows. She signed up for this.
Wow.
And this isn't just Hatzalah of like 5 towns or Brooklyn or Lakewood. This is Hatzalah in the world.
This is Hatzalah in the United States.
In the United States,
Hatzalah
right?
in the United States,
right.
right.
Israel's a different ballgame, but it's
Israel's
Hatzalah in the United States, which is ever expanding. We see in South Florida now.
Correct.
There's they just got their own ambulance, and
it's very exciting. I'm actually going down to Miami tomorrow morning because of that expansion every expansion has its challenges. So right now they're going through a financial challenge. We're going to try to figure out how to help them. And we all these affiliates that exist throughout the United States, we are the trademark holder of the name Hatzalah. And it's so important that, an organization that follows Das Torah and an organization that has, Vada Rabbanim and a very responsible board of directors is the steward of the name Hatzalah. Because, I tell people all the time, right? If you're my age, if you're 46, right? Probably around that age, right? If you're this age and you grew up in New York, you never call 911, right? You've only called Hatzalah.
You might not even know the number to 911.
You may not know that 911 is for a medical emergency.
Yeah.
You may think 911 is only for police and fire.
Thank you.
Right? But we get the police and fire calls also. You guys are cute. But we get those calls too, right? Like, there was this shooting in Flatbush, there was this guy who was attacking the pizza shop, right?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Sure.
The famous
Corner of a Notion.
All right, picture of Gabe Tenenberg sitting on top of a guy with his FM.
Dave Tenenberg, shout out. Wow, you are now
who is
his
not
favorite
getting shout
person.
out?
There you go.
Episode.
Gabe's awesome. So if you need a home loan, go to Gabe.
Whoa.
So we got that call, and our dispatchers are like, call 911, right? Is there somebody hurt? There's nobody hurt. Well, then call 911.
And let's say in like a community where there isn't Hatzalah, and there are Jewish communities that Hatzalah doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. So let's say someone from our community is traveling in Florida or traveling in Montana or Iowa, and something happens. We get those calls.
So they'll call Hatzalah.
They'll call Hatzalah here in New York.
And you guys are like, okay, it'll take us 8 hours to get there.
Do you triage at that point?
Our dispatchers, dispatchers are well trained, very well trained. And they chop right away what's going on. And they know that this is a family who's from our area that is somewhere else. And if they can't call 911 for some reason, in other words, they can't hang up and dial, we will call for them. We have that ability.
Wow.
And I encourage, just call us. We can easily put you in touch with either the local Hatzalah, right? If you live in New York, this is the only number. Don't try to memorize a different number. Just to call us.
Right.
We'll, within seconds, we'll have you connected with the right, Hatzalah.
A friend of mine in North Woodmere just told me today.
Say his name. Everyone's getting named. Everyone's getting shout out. And I'm like, why not?
I didn't ask him if for permission. So
Sure.
He told me that he just took a call for Hatzalah. He shows up to the facility. It was at an assisted living facility. He shows up, and the woman looks at him, and she's like, "I just hung up the phone."
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
how did you get here?
We
And he's like, I live right across the street.
It happens. Our dispatchers will routinely hear the knock on the door while they're still triaging the call. Routinely, that will happen, and that's exactly right what you just said, Momo. The reason we're so fast is because we're your neighbors, right? Because we live on the block.
Mm-hmm.
We had a story that took place, many years ago. Where a call went out, a woman had slipped in the shower, and she hurt herself very badly. And the call went out, and the neighbor answered, and he was about to go in, and the dispatcher called him on the cell phone, "Don't go in. Someone who doesn't live there is just as close, and he's going to go in."
Mm-hmm.
The dispatcher
Wow.
hopped the sensitivity, right? How this woman would never be able to live next to her neighbor again
Right.
in such a scenario. So the sensitivity is just so, thank God our dispatchers are really very special people.
I think everyone has a friend who's a Hatzalah member, or a son-in-law, or a sibling, or something. I have many. I daven in a shul, KMH, or Yossi Zakatinsky, and
Yeah.
we're giving shout outs. You
Thank
got
you.
members there. You got
Thank
Nossi
you.
Josefi,
Nossi,
Shimi
yeah.
Kanner, the Gutman, Tepper.
Sure.
I'm leaving somebody
It's
out.
the
and
pride
they'll-
of the RL.
Yeah, amazing people. And you know what? It's during davening, and like if there's a call, you can't hear davening. It's like beep beep beep. It's like the loudest thing. And just from being not a Hatzalah member, that there are awful tragedies that happen.
Sure.
That these young members, some of them are still in their 20s, some in their 30s,
Right.
young people who have to
Sure.
respond to, and oftentimes there's loss of life, unfortunately. To be able to respond to that emotionally and mentally is, I can't even imagine.
So here in the RL, it's really special because, and in some other neighborhoods, they have individuals available to talk to the members after they go. Right, there was a recent tragedy, right? So in Woodmere, and people like your neighbors, right? They saw some very devastating things, and I remember talking to one of the members myself, and he was having a rough time, with it. And I looked at him and I said, you saved that person's life, right? And he was looking at me with glass eyes. I said, yeah, I spoke to Woodmere Fire, and they said, you saved that person's life. And it's a lot, right? When it ends up happening, right? Like we spoke about earlier, right? It's exciting and it's an adrenaline. But when there's loss of life included in saving life. So RL has individuals available to help work with the members, which is so important. Mental health is really important. I'll tell you who else, Williamsburg. Williamsburg's great at it. And there's a recent tragedy a few months ago, Nebuch, school bus accident, the child. And Hatzalah was on the scene. And, those members saw some very, tough things. And the coordinators get together, the Rabbeim get together, the members get together. No one's, it's chevra before Hatzalah, right? The chevra-shaft, the family bond is very strong, helps get these guys, to the next call, to the next stage.
I'm sure there's a lot of organic, chevra, where chevra is manifest even before Hatzalah. I'm sure there's a lot of just organic discussion.
Oh, yeah.
And is there any effort on the part of Hatzalah to sort of formalize that, or just it happens enough?
We don't need to formalize it.
Don't need to fix it. It
Yeah.
ain't broken.
Like a certain brand of people, when a Hatzalah member, you see
Yeah.
a Hatzalah member, and they just band together, which is amazing. You're the CEO, and it's every CEO's dream to have an organization or a company where all its members they're really close.
Yeah, no. But they're also very passionate.
Yeah.
So that can have its challenges. But our guys live Hatzalah. They live their calls. They live what they're doing, and they live getting better at it. Right? That's why, some people have a hard time getting on Hatzalah, right? There are
Right.
guys who want to get on Hatzalah. And, you don't want to take too many people because we want our members fresh, right? When you call Hatzalah for whatever reason, you don't want a guy who hasn't taken a call in a month.
Mm-hmm.
You want a
Right.
guy who's taken 6 calls in the last week, right? You want someone who really knows what they're doing.
I've heard there's quotas that need to be maintained. Is that true, or that's just a rumor?
It depends. I don't know.
No, like I was in a meeting once.
Every neighborhood's different.
I was in like a business meeting once, and someone's like, "Oh, I need to take this call, otherwise I'm gonna miss my numbers for the month."
What's his name,
Maybe
huh?
he just wanted out of the meeting. I don't know.
No, also the guys challenge each other. That's also part of it. Like guys challenge each other. Can you do 100 calls in a year?
Nice.
Can you do,
Hundreds a lot.
no, that's a base.
Right.
Right. So, hundreds now, I mean, we have guys that
What's the
do-
call volume like?
we have 250 a day.
250 calls a day.
Yeah.
That's
So let's say
what's that? That's RL
citywide.
or
Citywide.
citywide.
Yeah. 250 a day, probably around 70,000, 60 to 70,000 a year.
Wow.
And they multiply that by 6 guys because we send, so
Sure.
right. Those are your opportunities to get on a call.
And I've been on 911 ambulances. For a period of time I was becoming an EMT. I was doing senior care shifts and everything.
Sure.
And I've also been in Hatzalah ambulances, and it's a different ball game equipment
I can
wise.
imagine. Yeah.
It's just
Equipment wise.
equipment wise.
Oh my God! Of course.
Hatzalah is playing with.
Yeah, we are. We are. Our ambulances are mini hospitals. The only thing that our ambulances, first of all, our private cars are mini hospitals.
Right, members are running in with a
Right.
lot.
Yeah.
Why isn't 911 up to?
We first of all, our members are all volunteers,
Right.
right? So our overhead, everything that we bring in goes right into those ambulances, right? There's of the employees within the entire Hatzalah system, there's maybe a dozen. Right? There are very few paid employees. So all the money goes right back into the care, right back in. And
I feel like we need to double click on that.
yeah,
You just mentioned call volume,
right,
and multiple people typically show up to a call,
right.
and each and every one of these members that are giving of their life and for this service are doing so on a voluntary basis.
They are all volunteers, right?
It's incredible.
I was at a meeting at Central Park today. I love that place.
Shout out my Shaarei.
Yeah, you can find me there most Friday mornings.
If you're trying to become a Hatzalah member, just hit Central Park Friday morning. What time?
yeah, usually 10 o'clock.
You like corn muffins?
Love the corn muffins.
All right.
Yeah, but too many. I always tell people, it's hard to keep skinny in New York.
Yeah.
But I was there for a meeting this morning, and one of our members came in, right, sitting there with his wife, and I went over to the couple after I finished my meeting, and I thanked her. I said, thank you for letting your husband be a Hatzalah member, because the sacrifice from the family,
Right.
it's big. It's big. They leave during Seder, right? They leave during Shabbos Suda. They leave during davening.
Right.
So, it's a challenge for the families, and you have these supportive Hatzalah wives, as they call them, who really make a big difference in our organization to allow all of this to occur.
Does Hatzalah do anything to for the wives?
All the different neighborhoods, they do great stuff for families. And you'll have the challenges.
Right.
So I get a concert, my husband's gone.
Yeah.
But they
Right.
do. They try very hard.
And it doesn't work if it's just allowing their husband, right? It's typically coming
They
from a
have
place of
to
support.
Yeah, it's called a supportive Hatzalah wife. Yeah,
Yeah.
those supportive Hatzalah wives makes all the difference in the world.
On a personal level, you're dealing in an industry now that when someone calls Hatzalah, it's usually not a good thing. Usually no one ever wants to call Hatzalah. And there's a lot of just terrible stories and things that happen. So you're dealing now in an industry that it's just heartbreaking, for lack of a better word, most of the time, unless
Right.
there's a child being
Right.
born.
We get a
But-
lot of that, and that's awesome.
Right.
Right.
But most of it isn't.
right? So how on a personal level do you, I guess, not that you're the one who's running into these calls, but you're helpless in a situation like that, and you hearing this and you seeing this, and maybe because you're privy to a lot more information than we are, how do you cope with that?
Me personally?
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll be in the car and, my wife will she'll overhear, right? Certain things that are going
Right.
on. Normally I'm a steel trap. But if I'm in the car, I have to take a call, sometimes she'll hear what's going on and she'll look at me at the end of the call. And she's like, how do you sleep at night? And it's just siyata d'shmaya. You just have to, right? It weighs on you, no question. Rav Shlomo Zalman, the famous Ma'aser, Rav Shlomo Zalman, he was Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was one of the Gedolim past generation, not past generation, our generation, but he's been gone for a good 20 years. And they saw him once in Tveria. One of the Talmidim was in Tveria for vacation. They saw him walking on a private beach. That's Rav Shlomo Zalman, what's Rav doing here? He says, if you want to become, an older Rosh Hashiva, right, then you need to take these mental breaks. So that's for sure true, because, tzorchei rabim merubim heim, but like you said, you're helpless, and hashlech al yahavcha v'hu yichal kalecha, right? That's what the pasuk in Tehillim tells us, right? Throw it on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he'll support you, right? So just I chazah that pasuk all the time. Hashlech al yahavcha, throw your pekala, give that pekala to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because there's nothing we can do about it.
I have a tiny feeling that a lot of Hatzalah members are listening to this episode.
Could be.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll get the feedback.
What if you can talk directly right now to every single Hatzalah member that's in the United States?
Yeah.
What would you
You
tell
guys
them?
are awesome. You guys are awesome. Keep it up. You guys are awesome. Just keep getting better. Keep it up. Chavetz Chaim says that when he was younger, he wanted to change the world. He decided to change himself, and then he changed the world. So you guys make yourself better, and you'll continue to change the world.
Amazing. Hatzalah has really changed the world, and the position that you have is continuing to change the world.
Baruch Hashem.
I want to end off with one question on my own, which I asked our last guest, and I just love the question because it makes you think. If there would be a movie made of your life, what would the title be?
Hey, what would the title be? They called him Mark.
They called him Mark?
Called him Mark.
Okay. They called him Mark. We can go with that.
They called him Mark. The Goyim, that's what they all call me. They always go, my name is Yechiel Moshe. It's my given name, Yechiel Moshe. And when I was in college, I developed the name Mark. I took Moshe and I developed the name Mark. But in a similar way that Mike Tress, right?
Yeah.
That he overcame tremendous adversity throughout his life, despite, whatever position he had, and he always still had the challenges. I feel very similar in my own life. So, definitely a lot of challenges and tremendous siyata d'shmaya, and no matter what, I think I had a smile on my face. People, continued to work well with me. So, let them call me Mark.
Nice. I think Naki calls them the rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
I'll get one in. If there was some advice that you'd want to give to someone who's sort of setting out in their career, maybe they're a few years into their Cincinnati Kyle, and they want to make a difference. They want to lead a meaningful life and prioritize that over parnasa per se. What would be your advice for them?
Don't sacrifice your family. Don't sacrifice your family. It was advice given to me early on in my career, and I feel very blessed. I have a tremendous relationship with my wife and my children, and that's because never, when it got too much, I knew to step back and focus on that. Because if you sacrifice your family to advance, even for the klal, right, there's going to come a period where you won't be able to focus on anything other than your family. So focus on them now.
Chesed starts at home.
Starts at home. But it's not chesed. It's development. Because like we said earlier by the Chavetz Chaim, right? By you working, it's so easy to get up. I mean, we said earlier, right? People don't like to speak in public. But for guys like us, it's so easy for me to go up in front of 5,000 people, 10,000 people, and, give a rousing.
Give like a Tony Robbins
right,
speech. Yeah.
Exactly. But how hard is it to listen to your second grader, your fifth grader do homework, right? And which is going to have the greater impact on Klal Yisrael? It's probably developing that fifth grader or that second grader and showing them that love, right? So my advice would be, don't sacrifice your family.
Nice.
Yechiel, Mark,
Yeah.
CEO on Rabbi, thank you so much for taking the time and imparting these meaningful messages with our audience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nachi and Momo. It's great to see you guys and great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Meaningful People podcast. Hope you enjoyed. A lot more content coming soon, so make sure to subscribe, rate 5 stars.
And I'm going to double click on one thing that we pulled
here he's
out
double
from Rabbi
clicking.
Kalish, just how when he encountered very challenging issues in his life, decisions that he had to make, there was a real context of a relationship with Rabbanim that he can rely on, that he can connect to, and it's there so that when the crisis arises, he can draw upon it. And I encourage everyone, when you just finished listening to something, reach out to your rabbi, reach out to your Rebbe. Make sure that there is a relationship there that you can tap into when you have a real crisis in your life.
Yes, that is true. Reach out. And just want to let you know, you can go ahead and listen to a podcast that is created by the Meaningful Minute team, Deep Meaningful Conversations. If you're from Orthodox woman, it is by 2 ladies, Alex Fletcher and Rifki Silver. I think you'll enjoy it. So just search in Spotify or Apple, Deep Meaningful Conversations.
Very deep.
If you're a podcast person, I think you'll love it. Until then, we'll see you next week, guys. Adios.